Hello and welcome to the Problem Gambling Podcast. I'm Barry Grant, an addiction counselor with Extern Problem Gambling, and my co-host is Tony O'Reilly, also an addiction counselor and also working here at Extern Problem Gambling, but out on the road very, very soon as the academic year is about to start again, traveling around the country, mostly Wicklow and South County Dublin, where we have funding from the HSE and the Brain Drugs Task Force and other bits and pieces further afield, including Donegal and here, there, and everywhere, doing gambling harm prevention talks, which are proven to be very, very popular over the last, you doing the 5, 6 years at this stage?
Yeah, probably full time since COVID. But probably we'd done a few before that, wasn't it? We got a little bit of funding before then. But it's yeah, so it's doing about 5 years, and it's a couple of schools now. I'm back to it's my sixth and seventh year because I would have done stuff before that as well. So it's
Mm.
great that the schools invite us back, and it's also great to get the funding from the HSC and the task force because the schools, I believe that any school should be able to have any kind of workshop around gambling for free. So it's brilliant. So it's in the process of organising all that at the moment. And then probably not next week, the week after next, I'll be packing up the car with all the gear and going again. The car is like my second home for 9 months, but it's very worthwhile. I really enjoy it. And hopefully a few podcasts along the way with the schools. As I mentioned last week, like one of the students came second in an award. So any of the schools, I'm always open to doing podcasts with them or different things because it gets them talking about and thinking about and get doing projects on it, which is what we want. Start conversations. So it's brilliant, yeah. So it's all good, all go.
Yeah, and the young people in the schools like that, they're doing podcasts and they're doing projects. I remember when I started about 10, should be about 10 years ago, 10, 11 years ago. One of the first schools I ever did was down in Ennis in County Clare, and there were transition year students in a girls' school. Maybe I've told this story before. Anyway, I'll say it again. And they brought in not just their school, so they made a kind of big symposium, and they brought in transition year school students from other schools around County Clare. So there was hundreds at this thing,
Mm.
and they brought in other guest speakers. Justin Campbell, I think, was speaking at it, another couple of guest speakers. I was going on after the girls from the Ennis school gave their presentation, and I'm sitting there in the crowd, and I'm watching them do the presentation, and 90% of their presentation was my presentation. I was
Where
about
did I
to
get
do.
it?
When I came on, the amount of research that they'd done
Mm.
was that. Now I'm not saying that because my research and my presentation is so good, but it was just like almost entirely what I was about to go on and do.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there going, "Oh, sweet Jesus, what am I going to talk about?"
Oh, it's brilliant. And some of the podcasts I've done during the year, like, were brilliant. Some of the questions were really thought-provoking, especially I think it was in St. Mark's and Tala, and there was three or four of them interviewing me with the teacher, and like they had all the questions prepared and they're coming in, and the couple of students in the background were taking over next year and they were seeing how it was done. So like it's great that they're bringing gambling to the school as well from a student's perspective as an issue because my hope this year in the school talks is to get as much learning off the students more so than I usually get and maybe start incorporating that into it. So it's great that they're interested. It's great that they're like they'll contact afterwards doing projects, and I'm always very open to doing any kind of that stuff because it's something that's it makes you feel good about the work you do, knowing that it's having some kind of impact on someone is um has enough an interest to go research, as you're saying, as much
Yeah.
and even present on it then. So hopefully we can continue that this year. But it's yeah, and gearing up for the busy time, as you know yourself, I constantly just driving and everything, but it's all good. Listen, there was a
Okay.
time many years ago I would have hoped to be as busy as this, so I don't complain about it.
Yeah. So last week we touched a little bit on today's topic. Last episode was looking at self-compassion. We kind of drifted on many tangents as we tend to do. One of those tangents was emotional regulation, which is something that Tony, I think, focuses on a lot more than I do, and I probably should focus on it a lot more, although it is something that always comes up in different ways. So explain to the nice listener or viewer what are we talking about with emotional regulation and why is it
S-
important?
So it's probably, I suppose, firstly, it's about viewing emotions as a part of kind of like a bundled experience made up of thinking, feeling, body sensations, and behavior, and the fact that they're all interlinked. And it's also about trying to find a balance in your kind of auto and relational regulation skills. And for lots of times, I suppose in gambling, the gambling probably came our way to, part of it would have been our way to regulate our emotions. You'll often hear someone's on a high, they'll gamble. If they're on a low, they'll gamble. And for me, I suppose in my own, um, I suppose addiction and recovery, more so recovery, I've had to learn how to start to regulate my emotions because like emotions will still be there in recovery. Like, as Usher McConville famously said in the podcast, the best thing about recovery is getting your feelings and emotions back. The worst thing about recovery is getting your feelings and emotions back. So it's about learning how to understand them as a kind of a bundled experience. Like if we're feeling low energy or low mood, it'll have an impact on how we think. We might view the world as everything is wrong in the world, and that can lead back to unhealthy thinking styles, which can lead back to compulsions to gamble. So it's about also what I do in my own client work, on my own kind of life, I suppose. I try to develop coping strategies for managing emotional dysregulation. And I tend to, as I've said before, many, many podcasts, shopping comes in as that coping skill, which is it's probably unhealthy for me as well. But also I nowadays try to do a bit more kind of grounding exercise, a bit more gym work, and also trying to reconnect with people. So it's kind of getting a balance of the individual regulation skills and also relational regulation, which could be for some people meeting a friend for coffee. It could be playing a sport with a team. It could be especially going to GA meetings and other kind of recovery meetings. It could be having conversations. And then their kind of individual regulation would be kind of like the gym, mindfulness, listen to music, going for a walk, stuff like that. And it's all about having a balance of both, but also recognizing when you're drifting outside something called a window of tolerance. And they say like when you're outside of that for too long, you tend to go into autopilot, and then autopilot leads to thinking around gambling. So it's kind of like a wave, I suppose. Like it's okay to feel overwhelmed, it's okay to shut down emotionally. We all do it, but it's also to recognize that this has happened and what can I do to get that back inside that kind of window tolerance or that kind of um range of where everything is kind of you're able to manage stuff. Like as I would have mentioned last week, like we tend to think more clearly if we're rested, or we tend to, if we're not, we don't get as emotionally overwhelmed if we're in a good kind of headspace. So for me in recovery, it's about being proactive around that, instead of reactive. You mentioned the firefighting last week. So it's about recognizing when you're drifting outside of that, but also to kind of how can I catch it? How can I, um, I'll use some of the acronyms later on. How can I pull myself back and put things in place to get myself back in there? And that can be going up and down all day, but I do know that when we are shut off emotionally or overwhelmed for too long, we go into unhealthy kind of ways of thinking, and that can be a breeding ground for more sustained compulsions around gambling.
Yeah.
That's a kind of a
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. And that like idea of a window of tolerance, like that's not like a one size fits all where everybody
no,
has the same size window of tolerance. Like if you've been through some extremely traumatic stuff, your window of tolerance could be quite small and you
yeah,
need things to be very stable and you need to get a good night's sleep and you need to be eating right, you need to be looking after yourself and you need other people to be kind towards you
mm,
and that'll keep you within your kind of small window of tolerance, but
yeah.
anything that kind of pops up outside of that, which is life is going to throw things at us now, boom, very quickly we're outside of our window of tolerance.
Yeah,
So
and
what's
we
your
might be more
yeah,
intolerant at different
yeah,
times of the
yeah,
week. It could be, Monday morning, Friday evening. And like the way my supervisor, and he's got a great course on it, the way he kind of explained is like if you have two kind of thick lines, 0 to 10, that's your range. Now, my range, I always say it's between 3 and 7. So if I'm between 3 and 7, I'm kind of feeling it's about picking out a time when you feel rested, you feel like your head is in a good space, and kind of connecting to what that feels like in the body, what your thought process is, and it's about having that range, but also recognizing if I'm drifting outside of that before you get outside of your 10 or go down to -4, minus or plus 15 or whatever it might be. So it's about recognizing your range of when you feel most um, settled, but also kind of connecting to what kind of happens in the body when it's all about body sensations. It's nearly like recognizing the feeling before the feeling, which can be difficult.
mm,
So it's kind of I find if my head gets very I feel like my head's going to explode. And very similar to what happened when I used to be in the height of gambling. but I start getting very overwhelmed. And then I start shutting down emotionally. So I just become very disconnected. My partner often said to me, "Are you okay?" Like, and I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." It's just, you just seem a bit distant. It's just my way of shutting down emotionally. So there's a thing called when you're outside your window tolerance, when you experience too much, but the wording is always a bit mad. Arousal, it's called hyperarousal. I mean, you don't feel when you're switched off emotion, it's called hypoarousal. So your window, as you mentioned, your window tolerance becomes smaller when you're either in that state of hyper or hypoarousal, and you're at risk of becoming overwhelmed quickly and being out of control or completely shut down. And I do feel when we are in those places, we are more susceptible to negative thinking styles, which can lead to impulsivity and compulsion as well.
Yeah, and we have like a biological imperative as well called homeostasis. So
Mm,
like you see it all the time with addictions, let's say you engage in some activity, gambling or drug use, whatever it might be, substances. You flood your system with dopamine. Happy days. That feels great. Right? But because the body is always striving towards the baseline and getting you back to the baseline, it goes, okay, you've had too much of a good time there, pal. No more dopamine for you for the next day, 2 days, three
mm,
days, and often, be talking to clients who might be in that kind of weekend warrior mode and they're only feeling normal by Thursday. You know what I mean? They've been on a bender Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They're only starting to feel human again on Thursday. That's your homeostasis.
yeah,
It's the withdrawal part of tolerance and withdrawal, which are the two defining characteristics of any addiction. Your tolerance is always going up, which means
yeah,
that your withdrawals are always getting worse, right?
yeah,
You have to up the dosage to get the same buzz. The withdrawals get worse because it's a balancing act. You're putting your foot on the accelerator, and the homeostasis in the body is putting the foot on the brake, which is the withdrawal, right? So you got like at a biological level, you've got all that stuff going on, which is saying get back to baseline, get back to baseline. And like I think maybe I'm misinterpreting this, but this would be my way of thinking about it. The When we go outside the window of tolerance, these drives kick in to say get back to baseline, get back inside your window of tolerance. What works? Okay, I know alcohol works, I know gambling works, I know drugs work, I know shutting down emotionally works. I know shopping, all these different things
mm,
work. And that's part of our kind of psychological, maybe homeostasis to say, get back to baseline, get back inside your window of tolerance. The firefighter comes out. The firefighter's kind of like, that expression, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. So, firefighter's only got a hammer, just everything's a
yeah.
nail. Or am I
Yeah, no,
misinterpreting?
no, it isn't. But also, like, I haven't read the book in a while. I may actually start reading or listening again. Like Annie Lembenke's book, Dopamine Nation. She talks about your dopamine receptors becoming flooded. So again, like she talks about it takes a while to get back to that homeostasis. Like I remember I mentioned the earlier podcast, it took me 2 years to be able to watch a match and enjoy it for what it is because I was so on such a heightened dopamine buzz watching games because of gambling. It took such a while to be able to get back and just watch it for what it is again. And your dopamine levels have been so flooded for so long, it does take a while for that balance and homeostasis to come back in. And that's where that's the withdrawal. That's the kind of getting your just me brain freeze, getting your time away from gambling, and it's that the brain is craving to get back, and that's where that's why sometimes some people need to go to treatment to get that balance back. Some people need to that abstinence from it can help you get that kind of balance back. But in the early stages, it's kind of you're craving it because your body is craving to get back to that. So yeah, it would be a mixture of how you described it and that flooding of dopamine receptors. And the brain has to rewire itself to get back to that normal because it's constantly trying to get back to that. But for so long, we're after being in a heightened state of hyperarousal, gambling, or hypoarousal when you're on the downside of a big loss. So you're always in those constant states. So it does take a while to get back to that normal way of thinking. And when it does, that's when you often hear people in recovery talking about, I'm learning to live life again and enjoy life or enjoy a match or enjoy spending time with my family. But in the early stages, that can feel very overwhelming because your brain is craving that, as you mentioned, is craving that high or that low even.
Yeah, and it's that circular trap where
Mm,
you use the thing that helps you to kind of calm down and put you back inside your window of tolerance. But then you develop a tolerance to that thing.
Yeah.
So then you experience withdrawals to that thing. Just the way the body works.
Mm.
Withdrawals take you outside of your window of tolerance. So you up the dosage and you do
Yeah.
more of the thing, and now you're in the trap, right? You're just
Yeah.
in that circular trap of addiction, right? And
Yeah.
then, early recovery, you're going through withdrawals, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's gambling, drink, drugs, whatever it is, you're going through withdrawals, which means you're automatically outside of your window of tolerance. And, most people, obviously, there's a substantial number of residential treatment beds around the country, but most people who are addicted to anything do the recovery in the community. And
Mm.
even if you do start out in residential, well, you're doing the rest of your recovery in the community. So you're going through withdrawals in a space where the thing, especially if it's online gambling, is
Mm.
just an inch away. It's just you could take away this withdrawal and put yourself back inside your window of tolerance and use that as a admittedly unhealthy emotional regulation
Mm.
tool, just like that, right? And that's
Yeah.
the big part of the challenge.
Yeah, and that's why some people drift towards shopping or pornography or escorts or whatever it might be for that same risk taking. And if you look at anyone who does go to treatment for stuff like alcohol and drugs, they have a community detox. But with gambling, there's none of that. So, and again, you're in an environment where you're being flooded by images and talk of gambling and opportunities to gamble. So, it's very difficult in the early stages or mid stage of recovery to go through that withdrawal. And like I always say, I needed to go into treatment for that 3 months because you didn't have any, well, there was opportunities to gamble in there and in prison, but it's kind of you are less exposed to the triggers, which means that you are less likely to go back on. But the thing is, like I always mention in treatment, the way of combating that withdrawal is filled in that day. So, like as I always mention, from start to finish, your day is nearly set out for you, whether it's meditation, meetings, work therapy, recreational stuff as well. Your day is laid out for you. And some people struggle when they do come out with treatment to get that balance back in their life. And you look at time, access, money, it's about filling that time or that void. That distraction piece or that filling that void can be a way of lessening that withdrawal that is there from gambling as well.
Yeah, yeah. And withdrawal, yeah, just to put a cap on that part of it, is emotionally dysregulating, right?
Mm,
So, and this is part of the challenge, right? So, people use addictive behaviors and substances because usually they have the need to learn emotional regulation skills, and they come
yeah,
across this thing and they go, well, that does the job, right?
yeah,
There are healthier options, of course, that we would
mm,
encourage anybody to engage in. So then you take away this crutch, this coping mechanism. The person now desperately needs to learn other forms of emotional regulation that do not involve addictive stuff, preferably. Um, and that is an extremely important part of the process, I would say. So, what would you say if we look at things that people can do? Let's say you're listening to this, you're in early recovery, your crutch has been taken away. The people around you expect you to be all singing and all dancing because the thing that you were addicted to is gone. Therefore, you must be happier and feeling better in yourself. When in reality, for most people, this thing that they were using as a crutch and a coping mechanism to regulate emotions, some of which were caused by the addiction itself, but not
mm.
all, is now gone. So we need to.
Yeah, but you're also dealing with the fallout of the addiction as well, like especially financial instability sometimes or legacy. So I think there can be situations that are not even gambling related, can be very triggered as well. Like it could be, that guilt or that shame. So they use a thing kind of like one part of it is mindfulness. And I suppose that sometimes when people use the word mindfulness, nearly have a brain freeze when they hear it. So like, there's an acronym called sober that some people use. So it's like stop and step out that automatic pilot. And sometimes that's done when people are arguing, someone might run out the door and run out of the room and bang the door. It removes the person from the situation. So you step out of that space. Another one is observe your body sensations, your feelings, your thoughts, behaviors. So it's really trying to connect with where am I feeling the stress? Can I lessen that stress? What thoughts are in there? Can I challenge those thoughts? breathe and you focus on your breath. It's about, and that's why it's about trying to just even take that few minutes just to kind of breathe deeply, which is calm, automatically calm the head, expand your awareness of the whole body and the situation. So in the environment you're in, and then respond. So it's awareness, all this aware, like the whole thing of coming into a mindful state, it gives you the awareness. And when you are in that awareness space, it does give you a choice of how you respond in that moment. So it is about nearly catching the thought, as we all spoke about before in previous podcasts, catch the thought and then challenge that thought. So sometimes with mindfulness, it's about gradually coming out of that situation and refocusing yourself. So that acronym sober, I can do up a thing and maybe put up on another episode as well. And like I had a client there last week who had a compulsion. I won't be breaking confidentiality. He said he
Mm.
had a compulsion during the Rose of Tralee, would you believe? And I often do a thing like the cost benefit of gambling. So I know I write down, like I get a person to write down the benefits they're getting from not gambling. And then I flip and say, well, if you do go back gambling, you'll end up, being less mindful, being less open, honest, stuff like that. And when he got the compulsion, he went into this kind of distraction place. He took out I sent him a screenshot of what we written down, and he took it out, and it wasn't the fact that he was kind of going down through it saying, oh yeah, if I do place this bet, all this is going to happen. It was that distraction piece. So he stepped out of that automatic pilot by just taking the phone out and looked at the screenshot. So again, we can do things like that. We can have, and you look at any relapse prevention, it's about having a plan in any situation. So if you do feel overly stimulated or overly emotional, outside your wind tolerance, in a hyper arousal state, it's about having a plan in place to bring yourself back down. Because I get very manic at times, for various reasons. But also if you feel shut down emotionally, how can I just, what is my plan to kind of pull out that? You might feel overwhelmed. If you're looking at window tolerance, it could be 0 to 10, zero being very, shut down emotionally. You might be at a -2. And it's about having a plan saying, well, how can I get that from -2 even to 0? And even by doing that, you're grounding, you're stepping out of that situation. So mindfulness can be a way of nearly calming, but also I think about that gratitude stuff as well. That sounds terrible, the gratitude stuff. Being able to be grounding around gratitude, it can get you out of that negative mindset that brings you kind of up from that feeling of being totally shut down. Maybe just to right, I can reconnect back with someone here now as well. So stuff like that, I think, is what we can do as well. Like grounding will be, you might see it from anxiety, like it might be identify stuff you can see, touch, sound, smell, taste. We done it. There's the raisin. You might be able to explain that more. The raisin kind of thing, technique. Do you ever hear of that mindfulness where you pull out raisin and you smell it and you
Oh
touch it and
yeah,
you put between your finger? We done it in the Suicide or Survive workshops where do you have pieces of fruit on the table and you arrive in, and one part of it is really picking up the apple or an orange and kind of smelling it, looking at it, touching it, sound it, even listening to it, which sounds a bit mad. And then tasting it, but also tasting in a way that it's not like because I eat 100 miles an hour. It's just being more mindful, and that grounding techniques can help take us out of our own thinking, which is a lot of it when it comes to gambling as well.
yeah. It just reminded me I did some kind of mindful thing in a ex-prisoners project I used to work in years ago, but it was with chocolate, like lots of
Yeah,
different types of chocolate with chili
yeah,
in it, all sorts of things. That was
yeah.
very popular.
Yeah, so
But
chocolate would be maybe not so much raisin unless it's chocolate with raisins in it.
not as healthy.
Uh,
But trying to get people to slow down or, close your
yeah,
eyes, focus on your sense of taste. And yeah, like, I mean, you can combine those things as well. Like, I mean,
yeah,
if listener or viewer, all five of your senses work, I don't want to assume that they do, but let's say you're fortunate enough all of five senses work. Are you grateful that your eyes work? Okay, well,
mm,
maybe you can connect that to identifying 5 things in the room or
yeah,
space around you. And I would do that. Like a born daydreamer. I don't know how I made it through the school system. I did get expelled in primary school, but that's a whole other. That wasn't for daydreaming.
that's for another podcast,
That's
hopefully.
for another podcast. But anyway, somehow made it through the school system. But I find myself kind of spiraling off the daydream. It's like, oh, Barry, come on, reel yourself back in
Yeah,
here. And if I'm out walking the dogs, I go, okay, tree, footpath, bin, whatever, cloud. And I just go, okay, back into the real world, like the Little Britain thing. And you're back in the room, right?
yeah,
So bring yourself, because daydreaming is one thing that can be fine. It's kind of, it's not mindful, but it's not particularly harmful, but a lot of our mental energy or imagination goes into worrying about things that may or
Yeah.
may not happen in the future. That's not helpful or healthy, or dwelling on regrets of the past that we can't do anything about unless we can make amends in some, constructive way. So pulling ourselves out of that stuff is
Mm.
important, and that's a mindful process. And yeah, people's eyes kind of glaze over when you mention mindfulness
The
because
mind do anyway as well, but it is something I do, like, and then to add that, like, that distraction piece, even that temporary distraction, like the fella taking out the phone to look at the thing, it's a way to slow down that thing. It's not like it's going to fix it and everything is perfect. It slows it down, and it's like hitting a reset button. Like you're taking yourself out of that thought process. It's like, I don't know, maybe it's a wrong analogy of it, and I might have mentioned last week as well. Like if you have a song in your head and it keeps on going round and around your head. The only way to do is get it, a lot of people just say is play the song,
Mm,
and that distracts it from. But it's also distract yourself from that mindset. If you're having a reoccurring, do you ever have those dreams where it's looping and looping, and then
mm.
you wake up, and then sometimes you go back to sleep too quickly, and you go back to that loop again. But if you distract yourself for a few minutes, it can get back to kind of healthier dreams. I don't know whether that makes sense when I'm describing it, but it is that reset. And if when you kind of reset and slow things down, you will feel more able to cope with that overriding feeling. It's like that urge surfing, catch the thought, challenge it. It slows down. It doesn't mean that it's gone. And also that calm inner soothing thing is about, like, when you do soothe and reassure yourself, you're not trying to tell yourself to stop having negative feelings, because negative feelings and emotions will come in during the day. You'll be reminded of all the crap you done during gambling. You'll get, I get that a lot, where there's a lot of guilt and shame over stuff. It's just about catching that and kind of saying, right, I'm not trying to stop having negative feelings. And we're also saying, also, when you go outside your window tolerance and they do get over it, that's okay. It's just about not staying outside there for too long, because that's when things happen. And it's just about learning. I suppose learning, we talk about self-compassion as well, about learning that self-compassion and kind of say it's okay to feel bad some days. It's okay to wake up and have a shit day. Every day in recovery doesn't have to be roses and everything. We get up and everything's perfect, because it's not like it. If you go to any aftercare meeting down the country, most people will say that a shit week, but it's still better than any day drinking or gambling or whatever it might be. But it is that kind of encouraging language to yourself and saying it's okay not to be okay. The analogy we hear a lot, but it's also it does slow down that whole thought process. And you've mentioned a lot of this stuff, and I think a lot of people, to be fair, do a lot of this stuff automatically. And what I do with clients is I just get them I just put a word on it or put a diagram on it, and it gets them thinking about, well, what score am I today? Right, I'm an eight today. Why am I an eight? Because I'm a little bit of an eight because maybe I had a tough conversation at work yesterday. I got a bad email, whatever it might be. How do I get that from an eight to a seven? Well, I might just arrange to meet Johnny down the road for coffee tomorrow. And that even just brings it might down even half a point to 7.5, knowing it's just something bland. So again, these are little skills we can put in place: self-regulation and relational regulation. And again, it's not that we do it, everything's going to be perfect. It just takes the edge off it. And I think taking the edge off any compulsive thought can kind of help you ride that wave of compulsion.
Yeah, and if you look at, like, we're both former bartenders in our previous lives, why do people drink a lot of the time? Like sometimes
Mm.
it's purely social, but a lot of the time it's take the edge off. It's wine
Yeah,
o'clock, tough day at work. It was you're stressed, depressed, whatever it might be. Take the edge off. Why do people use other addictive substances? Take
yeah,
the edge off. Why do people gamble? Take the
take
edge
the edge
off.
off. Amongst other things,
And
but yeah, it can
amongst
be
other
elements of that.
things,
Yeah.
yeah. So like there are many, many, many other ways to take the edge off. And like that, yeah, I mean, when we're way outside the window of tolerance, like at either end of the spectrum, you've got the hyper where it's the really intense overwhelm, could be anxiety, panic, or the hypo where you can emotionally shut down. Like that's intense, but it's manageable, right? And you
Mm.
probably in your life, listener, viewer, experienced intense overwhelm, intense kind of shutdown, whatever it might be, and it passed, right? Like it's to say in the meetings. Remember Stephen Fry, seen some talk that he did about this. One of the most important things he learned going to 12-step meetings was this too shall pass,
Yeah.
right? Again, another one of those things that I don't think is in any of the materials. Is just kind of wisdom
Mm.
that's kind of organically grown out of the meetings. But like this too shall pass. So whatever the most intense feeling you're feeling, or if it's that intense numbness, that will pass, right? Everything is transient, everything is temporary. Whatever suffering you're experiencing right now is temporary. It will pass, right? Just like the most enjoyable thing you've ever experienced in your life, that came and went too. It was a wave. It peaked, it dropped off, and then normal
Mm.
life resumed. Like,
Yep.
so that's really important to remember as part of that process. Look, and like it's easy, I think, for us to sit here and say it. And if you're listening to this at home and you're having a really, really bad day and you're way outside your window of tolerance, you might be going, well, feck these guys. So it's
Yep.
easy for
Talking
you
shit.
guys to sit there and talk about it. And I have days when I'm way outside my window of tolerance, so I forget all the things that I could be doing, get me back inside it, and I act out, and I'm, not my best self by any stretch of the imagination. And then I try and have a chat with myself, and I try and reflect on it, and I try and think, okay, like there's lots of tools in the toolbox, Barry. Come on, back to basics here.
Mm.
Breathe. You mentioned that sober one. This another one where people's eyes glaze over. You tell them to breathe. So I'm always breathing. I'm breathing when I'm asleep. How is breathing going to
Yeah.
help me do anything? But
Music is brilliant way, I think. I think music
yeah,
can elevate your, or it can help you connect to part of it that can get through these things. I think it's just about recognizing it first and then having plans. Like, and mindfulness is a great way of doing it. Like, and again, I find it difficult to practice mindfulness on a day-to-day basis, but I do mindful things. I might switch off, have a coffee. I might walk downtown, have a coffee later on, and even just bring the book and switch off for a few minutes. And that, if you can do stuff like that proactively, gym is another thing. Like I've tried to get in over the last year. Like, and even going there and you're nearly crying and about to bed to go in, but once you've it done, you'd feel a little bit better having done it. And it's a proactive way um to kind of get through these things. But it's not a silver bullet. It doesn't fix everything, but I think it's recognizing and having a place to minimize it as much as you can. I think that's what we're trying to say, I suppose, as much as anything else. But there are ways, and I think that self-compassion piece comes into it as well. I think what we spoke about last week, yeah, the two of them are very much overlapping as well. I think how we talk to ourselves as well. I think we need to give ourselves a little bit of leeway for having bad days in recovery, and for reacting certain ways, but to catch that and then try to learn from it and go forward with it as well. But it's also good to kind of sometimes to sit back and say, you know what, I'm doing okay here as well. I haven't placed a bet in 3 weeks, like, and I've done well to do that. Like, what have I done that's worked? What could I improve? It's all awareness, for all of these things. And I'm constantly using this to kind of try to reflect where I'm at. Like, if I was to say where I am right now, I'd probably say definitely calm. I've done my bit of training this morning. I'm always a little bit not anxious coming on doing the podcast, but nearly kind of do this thing again now. It's just a block, a mental block. I mean, it's not that it's anything because I enjoy doing it. It's just that I've always said I've had that, but then I can kind of say, well, Anna, you're talking about stuff you enjoy talking about. And it just brings it down from not dreading coming on doing that. That's sorry, that sounds bad. It just that overwhelmness of thinking about it and just bringing it down to kind of, hold on, it's a podcast. You're coming on to speak for 45 minutes about a subject you know a bit about, and to have a conversation around that might help someone. And it just brings it down, kind of like, cop on. Like, I give out to myself, like, cop on to yourself. Like, you would have and I always say, like, I always go back to times in prison. You would have loved to be as busy as this when you're sitting in a cell worried about what you're going to do afterwards. You would love to be able to go for a walk when you were sitting in a cell. And that's that gratitude piece and that grounding piece. Like, like we have to, and we forget to do that, I think, as people a lot of time, could get so caught up in the rat race of life. I think sometimes it's good to kind of sit back and reflect on how well you're doing in recovery, how well we've done, and not so much about all the shit we cause. It's okay to reflect on as well, but don't get stuck in that either. Sorry, went on a bit of a rant there again.
no, it's good. It's good. And yeah, yeah, it reminded me as well that the acronym SOBER, from the emotional
Mm,
regulation. There's another one from the meetings where the acronym is son of a bitch, everything's real,
yeah, I never heard
It's
that
like,
actually.
and it's like, okay, you come out of addiction, it's like, oh God, here's reality. Now,
Mm,
reality can be amazing and fantastic, and it can also be challenging and difficult, and throw, a good dose of reality for a lot of people in early recovery, especially around gambling, is, well, how am I going to deal with the debt and who gets
Yeah.
paid first? And will I drip feed information to my loved ones about how bad the debt really is? Please don't
Mm.
do that. A lot of people do it. It
No.
is, you're not helping yourself or anybody else. Just put it all out on the table. The full disclosure on that one
Yeah.
would be my recommendation to everybody. And we can live in some fantasy world where we're gonna chase our losses, win loads of money, cash out and ride off into the sunset and laugh at the bookies or the casino owners or whatever. Or we can live in reality and actually start dealing with real world solutions to real world problems, not just with dealing with financial issues, but dealing with how do I manage my mental health? How do I manage my emotional state, my emotional dysregulation, which everybody experiences, not just people
Mm.
in addiction. Every single person experiences emotional dysregulation. How do I work on my relationships so that I'm being open and honest in my relationships so that I can have a real connection in my relationships? So right, reality, which is something that we all like to escape from sometimes, which is probably why I daydream so much, is is the only thing there is, right? We have all these escapes, with all the Marvel movies and the drugs and the gaming and the gambling and the million and one social media, all these things that we can escape off into some alternate reality or some dream world. But the only place you're going to get anything constructive done is in reality,
Mm.
you know.
And it's about
And
having open conversations, and if they are uncomfortable, because sometimes I find it difficult to have conversations with people around feelings and emotions, and I think it's about just trying to learn a way to how we can do that in a way that's more authentic with our loved ones, with our family and friends. And I think we can do that. I think that's where Gamblers Anonymous meetings and also therapy can make talking about stuff a little bit more comfortable. You feel a bit more comfortable talking about stuff. Not that you go out and everyone you meet, you give them your whole rundown of your life story, but it gives you the kind of sense of like it's okay not to be okay in a meeting. It's okay to share stuff. And I think that can give us a more balanced or grounded way of coping stuff rather than, as you said, escaping to the next thing, because we can escape into anything 24 hours a day now. Gaming, pornography, anything, Netflix, whatever it might be, drugs, alcohol. So I think to learn those new ways in recovery can be very kind of challenging, can be overwhelming in itself because it's something that you mightn't have done for years. Because it might have been gaming to gambling, or it might have been alcohol to drugs, so it's something that can be very scary. But the rewards you get from incorporating some of that into your life and your recovery can be huge, because that's when learning comes. And when you learn around your recovery, learn around the addiction part of it, again, it brings you into a place where you can choose to be a certain way in certain situations. You won't always get it right, and that's part of what we spoke about, the compassion bit. But at least you know you're it's like that self-actualization. You're working to where you want to be. You'll never quite get there, but you're working to where you want to be in life wise. And just to quote myself, like, recovery is about learning how to live again,
mm,
so
yeah, and living in the real world.
yeah, yeah,
That's the thing is,
yeah,
good, bad, and indifferent. And look,
yeah.
the real world can be amazing,
It can be horrible, but
and it
it's
can
we
be
have to live in it.
horrible.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that's, you know, yeah, escaping, because like if I spend all my days daydreaming about, writing an amazing film script or whatever and making
mm,
an amazing movie, but I never actually translate that into reality and sit down and start writing the bloody thing and then start contacting whatever film studios to get the thing made. It's all just off in my head, off in a
yeah,
daydream somewhere. There's no real world application of the thing, and even I love watching movies, but I will not watch a movie with a phone in my hand because I want to watch the movie and mindfully watch it. But if I go to the cinema, if I go with my daughters or whatever, and I look at people are just, double screening, which is like, okay, you're just getting the worst of both worlds here. Like you're
yeah.
not mindfully watching the movie. You're also not successfully escaping into the movie if that's what you're
No.
trying
And
to
it's
looking for,
yeah,
you know?
and it's like my pet hate people with phones at concerts. Like you're missing out on the experience of it by recording it to post up so someone can tell you how brilliant you are for being at a concert. Or that's a bit harsh. Maybe a lot of people do that for your own memories and stuff. But I think in my that's probably get a lot of abuse or in my experience of watching a concert, you're there to watch a concert. Like we were watching a match the other day, and achieving, you're checking live score, other games, whatever. You do miss out on the game in itself. So I think it's about having that mixture of being enjoying the situation or being present in that situation as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. We're both a pair of aging cranks anyway, so you
Yeah.
can ignore all that
It's like the
stuff.
two boys out of the Muppet Show. What are the two of them?
Waldorf and Statler. That's how
Yes,
old I
yes.
am. I actually remember that.
I don't even know that. Well, that's how disconnected I was. I remember them, but I don't remember their names. Brilliant.
But before we finish up, yeah, I mean that idea, like when I started out counseling, I used to do a lot of general counseling for employee assistance programs and stuff, and a lot of it was around stress management. I kind of give people that idea of a stressometer, and if
Mm,
you can, if you're walking around a 7 or an 8, you can probably handle a 7 or 8, and that's your kind of functioning level of stress. But if anything happens, something really small happens, you're going to go from an 8 to a 9 or a 10 in the blink of an eye over something small, right? So if you're walking around levels of stress, say, if we could just talk about stress for a second, are way up there, then anything's going to set you off. And people
mm,
often find, the stressful job, they come home and one of the kids knocks something over at the dinner table and boom, or, somebody makes some sort of a comment and they completely overreact because you're just hovering like right at
mm.
the edge of, of your
And that's what it is, emotional.
tolerance
That's the emotional.
levels
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
time. And to bring in that awareness and trying to encourage people when I used to do that kind of work, regular check-ins. Check in with your, if you eat three times a day, check in with yourself 3 times a day. If you
Mm,
have 10 cups of coffee a day, I don't recommend that. You know, check in with yourself every time you have a cup of coffee
yeah,
or a glass of water. Attach it to something else and go, where am I in my
yeah.
window of tolerance? Where am I on the stressometer? The stressometer is often very similar to the angerometer
Mm,
as well. Where am I? Or am I down that other end of the scale where it's hypo and I'm numb and I'm totally
yeah.
disconnected and withdrawn, isolation, which we spoke about the last day in terms of the self-compassion. But it takes regularly checking in, if you brush your teeth twice a day, well, do when you brush your teeth, just connect it to some other thing that you always
Mm,
do. We all have to eat food. We all have to drink fluids,
yeah,
connect it to something else. Check in with yourself. And the more you do that, the more, because everybody, let's say if it's the stressometer for simplicity's sake, if you've ever experienced 10 on the stressometer, you know what that feels like. And if you've ever been lucky enough to be completely relaxed, zero stress, you know what that feels like. But you might not know what a 3 feels like,
mm,
if you were to kind of really get a sense of that, or a 6. But
yeah,
over time, you calibrate it and you figure out, okay, well, an 8 is when I can really feel the tightness in my
yeah,
chest. Or, you kind of practice, 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 and then you can figure out where all these different things are on that scale.
yeah. Exactly. And then
Yeah.
learn skills to kind of bring it down. That's basically what it is. It's all easy in theory, but it's a little bit more hard to put into practice. But if you do, I do it a lot subconsciously and consciously in my day. I kind of constantly checking where am I at, like what can I do to be more relaxed. And it's if you have something to look forward to in the evenings times, it can be, or even the weekend, it can be a way of just kind of, well, I can get through all this, and when I know of something that's going to bring me back down, relax me. Even though watching Liverpool United like we were the weekend, it won't be do that like it usually is, but that's another conversation. I may jump. I have to
Okay.
do a few bits. So yeah, good chatting, and hope some of the listeners got something from our ramblings as usual.
Hopefully. Hopefully. All right. Thanks, dear listener. See you next time. Bye.